Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I thank each and every one of you for showing up tonight for our second installment of our series on public speaking. We got off to a very good start on our first installment with our attorney, Marjorie Tibbetts, and sharing her experiences with public speaking. I would like everyone to know that this is being sponsored by the Hedberg Public Library and the Nancy Parker Endowment Programs and the Janesville Toastmasters Club. Tonight, our speaker is a man who has served the districts of Beloit, Sheboygan, and Janesville for 37 years in the capacities of school psychologist, director of student services, and high school principal. In 1995, he was hired as the superintendent of the school district of Janesville, where he focused his attention on increasing student learning and achievement, also accepting and encouraging diversity, and improving parental involvement. He has also been very busy in serving the community at large, serving as the board of directors for the YMCA, also the Noon Rotarians, and has served as co-chair for the United Way fundraising campaign. Currently, his focuses are involved working with a national healthcare company, Studer Group. He is also working on how to develop successful healthcare programs into the school systems, recruiting minority, the study of critical languages, and budget issues. Tonight, he will share with us his personal experiences and the role that public speaking has played in the development of his personal and professional life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Thomas Evert.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome. Thank you very much to Toastmasters, and this is very close proximity for the camera, and I'll try to do the best I can. And thank you to Carol and Norm Olibaugh for once again being available to the community to help with the videotaping. I appreciate Norm and Carol, all you do, and I see you on a regular basis at the Bloodmobile, so thank you so very much. I was asked to speak about speaking, and this is the first time in my many years on this earth that I've had the opportunity to actually give a speech about speeches. And so please bear with me and be patient if you can in your interpretation, your responses, your thoughts. I'm not an expert by any means in terms of public speaking. I've done a lot of it, made a lot of mistakes, enjoyed it, and hopefully this will be beneficial to you. So thank you very much to Toastmasters for the kind invitation, and thank you to Yuri Rashkin for contacting me many months ago with this opportunity. So we're here tonight without snow, and we'll proceed. Cheryl Miller, our public information manager for the district, is here, and she'll coordinate the PowerPoint. This evening I'll review 5 areas. The speech I most like to give, observations on speakers, comments regarding presidential speeches and presidential candidates, guidelines that I have learned both the easy and hard way in terms of things to consider with speeches, and then the my all-time favorite speech, a speech which was given by Martin Luther King. So I understand we have UW-Whitewater students here this evening, is that correct? On a voluntary basis, or? Okay, great. Great. Oh, I remember way back when, the first day as principal at Craig High School was August of 1992. And I was so enthusiastic about the job and so much looking forward to doing a good job. A week or two prior to my starting, I had become a little bit preoccupied about the job. And I had done a few unusual things in terms of my day-to-day routine. Each morning I would get up and stop at the local McDonald's drive-thru and order a medium coffee with 2 creams. And as the start of the school year approached, sure enough, I went to McDonald's, ordered medium coffee with 2 creams. The only problem was it wasn't a McDonald's. It wasn't a fast food store that was open. I went to the wrong place. And so I thought, okay, the job's on my mind. It's starting to get to me a little bit. A few days later, I got up, got ready to go to work, and received a call from my wife. We lived in Beloit at the time, and she asked if I'd forgotten anything. And I said, no, I didn't think so. And she said, well, typically don't you drive me to work? I said, yes, I do. Well, I'd forgotten to drive her to work that morning. Then the big day came, the first day of school with the students. And at Craig, a longstanding tradition is on the first day, 9th grade students and transfer students go through their morning schedule. And that took place. And and this is a speech I give with much blood, sweat, and tears in my voice and my feeling. At about 20 minutes to 8 that morning, I received a call that an individual who had served as my mentor in Beloit had been murdered the night before. He had been on a trip to Louisville, Kentucky, had gotten into the wrong situation, and had lost his life. His name was George Kolak. I'd learned a great deal from George. And the administrative center in Beloit is named in his honor. From that 20-minute to 8 time, I then proceeded to go to the large auditorium to greet transfer students and 9th grade students, probably 400 or 500 students. And on the way down the hall to the large auditorium, I saw a student walking toward me, and the student looked unsettled, agitated, upset. And as we walked by each other, the student had become ill, and we had a mess. So I thought, day hasn't officially started, and a couple of unusual things have happened. Made it through the morning, went on, and decided to take noon hour supervision at the high school. It's not called noon hour supervision, but was in the parking lot checking on the students, because in the afternoon, the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders come in. Went out to the parking lot and noticed a lot of commotion, a lot of unrest, and walked into a crowd of students who had gathered around. And there was a young man and a young woman, and they were having words, and there was a lot of unhappiness. And all of a sudden, I heard this tremendous crack, a very loud crack. And I looked, and the girl's head was bleeding profusely. She had been hit in the head with some type of liquor bottle. And the two became entangled with their hands and hair, and there was a mess. Now, the police liaison officer and I had decided that he would serve lunch to the ninth graders. So he was in the lunchroom helping meet and greet the ninth graders, and could have used him at that time. So I separated the two and took each into the office, and it was a rather difficult, rocky start in terms of the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders as they got started. And of course, as I got started as their new principal. That afternoon, we had a faculty meeting. And I remember one of the faculty who I knew very well and who was very precise in terms of policies and procedures. And I remember her raising her hand as I reviewed the day and having her ask me if I used rubber gloves when I separated the two individuals during the fight. I said no, I hadn't done that. It hadn't been on my mind, but we had separated. Then made it home, fortunately, and was in the easy chair. And my wife turned to me about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and she said, "How was your first day?" And I turned to her and I said, "You know, it was good. I think I'm really going to like it." And I did. I did. It was just such a unique, extraordinary day that I knew whatever happened in the future would be fine and we would make it. I tell this story each year to approximately 60 to 90 first-year teachers at Craig. And I make an offer. I offer to take any one of them out to lunch who has a first day in their classroom that might be of a similar nature to what I experienced. And in 13 years, I haven't had any takers, but we'll see. All right, observations. For about the past 2 months, just after the invitation was offered, I have been observing speakers because I wanted to share comments with you about speakers. And I'm going to share with you observations on 4 speakers who I think have really done an outstanding job. One is Quint Studer, and Quint is president of a healthcare company called Studer Associates. And Quint is a former Parker High School teacher who has worked at Mercy hospitals and 3 or 4 other hospitals nationwide. And he has developed a firm that works with hospitals on how to improve their patient care. And within his concepts are concepts of addressing the needs of what he calls high, middle, and low performers. And the high, middle, and low performers are clearly defined, and there are strategies and techniques as to how to help each. Studer also places emphasis on improving communications among employees. He also places special emphasis on interviewing and hiring techniques. Several of our board members and administrative staff members have participated in workshops. And one of the things that I've noticed about Studer is his extraordinary energy level and how among presentation he might make to 400 individuals, he's constantly on the job. He would make Norm's job very demanding as he walks in and among individuals attending his conferences, crawls up on chairs and does the very active presentation. Elizabeth Burmaster is our state superintendent of education, and I've always admired her presentations, and she does something that is extremely important for a speaker. She stays on message, and the message is we absolutely must close the achievement gap among all students in Wisconsin. She touts how Wisconsin students score so very high in ACT scores, and yet minority students in our state are struggling. In addition, Elizabeth Burmaster is very appreciative of the work of school board members, employees, and the support of parents and community members. I heard James Bradley speak. James Bradley is from Anago, Wisconsin. His father was one of 6 soldiers who raised the flag at Iwo Jima. And he had a very compelling story about what it was like growing up as a youth and being educated in Wisconsin's public schools. And he went throughout the nation when he became an adult and interviewed his father's, I believe it was 5 fellow soldiers who were part of the flag raising. And he spoke very much about the inspiration of America, and he spoke about the importance of remaining patriotic and being willing to disagree, but not being disagreeable. And then finally, I'll comment about the Fonz. Henry Winkler, who talked about having a severe learning disability when he was a young man growing up in New York City. Winkler was very bitter and very critical as he felt he did not get the proper support from home or school. He found his gift in acting, and he was most appreciative of those individuals who supported his acting career. And of course, we all know of the many wonderful things he went on to do later in his life as an actor. But each of the 4 individuals I've listed had very unique stories and gave one pause to be sure to listen to their message. I was reading a book on Grover Cleveland. Let me just ask, how many of you have ever read a book about Grover Cleveland? I know you're going to tell me I should get a life, right? That's one of the things I do in my spare time is read books about presidents, and not necessarily the top 4 or top 10. Grover Cleveland, elected, I believe, in 1894, lost in 98, and re-elected in 1892. Grover Cleveland was described as an individual who memorized his speeches. He would give a speech for over an hour and never reference a note. I don't know if he would use that's a joke. But if you ever want an interesting book about a regular president in making speeches before TV, I highly recommend Grover Cleveland. And then I'm going to report on a Sunday morning on CBS news story where observations were made on presidential candidates, and the candidates who, interestingly enough, and this was, I believe, January, CBS report, they picked three candidates, Obama, Clinton, and McCain. And Obama was described, along with Huckabee, as having a preacher style. Clinton was described as having a lecturer style. And McCain was described as not really giving much of a speech, but shining in the area of question and answer. And so I think you can see, and we all know this, that there are various styles of speech that can be successful. The report went on to highlight Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965 in his civil rights speech, talking to the nation about the importance of his signing the Civil Rights Bill. It went on to talk about Ronald Reagan and how when Reagan was asked, Mr. President, can an actor be president? Reagan said, how could the president not be an actor? Which I thought was an interesting response. JFK, and we all know JFK's famous quote, and FDR's quote about the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And there is a compelling argument that the famous speech makers among presidents really have to have extraordinary skill, timing, but the situation also has to be right for their speeches to be considered of the highest quality and memorable. So in fact, their speeches help make them famous. Here are some of my observations regarding speech making. How many of you have ever watched Jerry Seinfeld show? Anybody? Okay. Do you remember the monologue when he talks about public speaking and death? Anybody remember that? Seinfeld indicates that most people say that death is the second worst thing you can do, that public speaking is the first thing. And we've heard that a lot, but he fed off that and did an entire routine about the fear that most of us have of public speaking and the difficulty and the high demand of speaking. I am of the belief that you start out a speech at 100% and it goes down from there. You make errors, you have pauses at the wrong time, you may or may not connect with your audience. You will always, just as an athletic contest or a musical performance, you will always have regrets. You will always coulda, woulda, shoulda. You'll think of things that you left out. You will think of things you should have said, or you'll think of things you said that you wish you hadn't. I think it's extremely important to know the purpose of your speech. The purpose of this speech this evening to me was to share observations on speaking. And this has been a very positive experience for me because it's so open-ended. And basically, I enjoy public speaking. It's something that's fun to do, something that I've done a lot and value. One of the speeches or areas of speech giving that I do a lot of is persuasion. I've worked on, I believe, 3 or 4 referendums over the years, probably more like 5 or 6 in fact. And I think it's very important to have a few key elements in mind regarding public or persuasive speeches and to be very repetitive in your message and to highlight 3 or 4 key areas anytime you have a persuasive speech. I also believe that in terms of my position as superintendent, and the very kind introduction highlighted the three areas that I try to emphasize: student achievement, accept and encourage diversity, and parental involvement. And hopefully have some success of providing the Board of Education with the information they need. And when asked for a recommendation, for example, should we start 4-year-old kindergarten, I am able to make some type of persuasive argument in terms of why I believe as I do. We also have technical speeches, and I have to say these are probably my least favorite. We have a Director of Business Operations in our district, Doug Button, who does a fantastic job of technical speeches, whether it's on computer software selection or budget issues, does a super job. Inspirational speeches, very, very important. And inspirational speeches can be very low-key. It doesn't have to have a flamboyant ring to it. It just has to come from your heart. When you're talking about serving students, for example. When I meet with the 60 to 90 new teachers each year, it's important that they receive a message from the superintendent about the important job they have, the important role they'll play, about the value of education, and how we hope that they're able to give from their heart and their head and their gut as they serve students throughout the year. And then the ceremonial speeches, which are always fun, typically lighthearted, but not always. And typically it's a recognition of the wonderful job someone has done, and I just very much enjoy the ceremonial speeches in my job. I think the key question with public speaking is to ask yourself, can you have fun? And I reference the Seinfeld introduction. And I don't know if it's true about death in public speaking or not, but can you have fun? Can you enjoy your speech? And can you enjoy giving your message to your audience? I mentioned errors in the fact that you start out at 100% and go from there. I have had the honor of giving 3 eulogies in my life. And the eulogies were very easy to write, and the speeches were actually very brief, and they were high demand, and I had to stay in very close control of my voice, my heart rate, made it through each of the 3, and I found that humor, having fun, believe it or not, while giving a eulogy really was the important thing for me. And the 3 individuals who I eulogized were my father, my father-in-law, and former Janesville Superintendent Bud Holt. And Tom, I know you know Mr. Holt, knew Mr. Holt, and it was just such an honor to give the eulogy for the 3 individuals. I had the pleasure of serving as state president of the superintendent's group for the state of Wisconsin about 5 years ago, and did a lot of speaking to superintendents across the state and to various groups, and developed kind of the consistent theme in terms of what I was hoping to accomplish. It was difficult for me to present to peers, because peers can sometimes tend to be a critical audience, And I wasn't exactly sure all the time what they were expecting from me, and it worked, but at times it wasn't the easiest. I've done a lot of speaking with the media, well, not public speaking, in situations involving the media. And each of the media have very different demands in terms of comments. You have your print media, radio, which is far and away my favorite, and television. And each of the three demand very different messages. I remember reading a quote from Senator Clinton when she was asked, what is it like to be a candidate? And at the time she was running for the Senate in New York. And how is that different from your other political experiences? And she indicated that the soundbite, the one sentence soundbite that you have to generate each day as a candidate was very difficult for her because, of course, she's very much into policy, and she's into depth, and she's into studying the issue and taking positions. So, and the media is so influential in our society. Martin Luther King, of course, was murdered on April 4th, 1968. And outstanding speaker in terms of style, and what an orator. But I encourage you, if you're interested in speaking, to go back and read his speeches. They're filled with tremendous content. And so many reference the I Have a Dream speech from August of 1963, and it was truly inspirational speech. I think when they've ranked the all-time 100 best speeches in American history, I think it's in the top 3. But the speech that is my all-time favorite is the night that Martin Luther King flew to Memphis, very tired. He really, according to reports from aides, did not want to be there, had been on the road for many days in a row, was tired, and there were constant threats on his life. Did not have a good sense or a good feeling about the speech in Memphis, went to the hall where he spoke, and he spoke to community leaders and sanitation workers. And I brought a book that I value, given to me by my daughter and son-in-law. And I have had the opportunity to visit the Martin Luther King Center in Memphis, Tennessee, and spent the entire day. And Martin Luther King believed that one of the primary ways to address racism in our country was to raise the economic level of all individuals, to have good jobs for all individuals, and of course to treat individuals with fairness and equity. But he believed in an economic approach. And King, in his speech from April 3rd, talks about the Bible, talks about the oppressed rising up against those who were the oppressors, talked about the struggle of humanity, talked about the struggle within each of us, the good and the bad. He said Christians reference it as Christ and Satan, but he talked about all religions having the same struggle, that men and women constantly struggle with what is doing right versus what is doing wrong. He then went on to talk about fear and fear of dying. And when I hear this speech, I get chills because it's almost as if he's predicting his death the very next day. And of course, he was assassinated the next day. And then he goes on to tell a story about a book signing in New York City, where an older African-American woman comes up, just as Cheryl is sitting here, comes up and asks, "Are you Martin Luther King?" And he said yes. And the next thing he knew, he was in an ambulance to a hospital in Harlem as she had stabbed him. And if the stab wound had been just this much further in, it would have hit the aorta. And he goes on to talk about how he received letters and notes of condolences from the president, the vice president, the governor, all the community leaders. And he indicates that he appreciated that, but he forgot the message that they had to say. And then he received a message from a 12-year-old white girl. And the girl said, "Dear Dr. King," and I'm paraphrasing, "I'm so sorry about what happened. I want you to know I'm a 12-year-old white girl." And it said in the paper, Dr. King, that if on the way to the hospital you had sneezed, it could have very well moved the knife over just enough that it would have punctured your aorta. And the girl said, "I'm so happy that you didn't sneeze." And then Dr. King, the speech giver, takes that and cites 8 or 9 examples of where I'm so happy I didn't sneeze because I would have missed the progress of the sit-in in Charlotte in 1960. I'm so happy I didn't sneeze because I would not have been able to talk about I Have a Dream. I'm so happy I didn't sneeze because I would have missed the president signing the Civil Rights Bill in 1965. And he went on to add others. And that's how he concluded his speech. And of course, we know what happened the next day. I hope you have a favorite speech. Speech giving can truly inspire us. It can take us outside our dimension. It can take us outside our comfort zone. Thank you, Toastmasters, for keeping speech making alive. I worked with Howard Gage in the mid-1980s with Toastmasters. Norm was there, Tom was there, and we had our administrators go through a series of activities that Toastmasters led. And our school board agenda, Commissioner Rashkin, includes some of the ideas from Toastmasters way back then. Number of minutes of presentation, is this an informational item or an action item? All things we learned from Toastmasters. But I submit to you that unless groups like Toastmasters disappear, we can lose a lot because we're bombarded with the media and we're bombarded, and our young people are bombarded with messages. And I think there is truly something positive about hearing speeches, about hearing individuals who are willing to step forward and communicate a message. So with that, I would like to thank you, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. The only topics I don't want to talk about are snow day makeups and, it's a joke, it's a joke. Anyone with a question or a comment, feel free to make a comment. It's fine if this is interactive, I assume. If we have dialogue, it can be questions Anyone?
My name is Brian Allen. I'm from Janesville, Wisconsin. I was curious, you mentioned that you preferred radio interviews over other types of media. Can you explain why and how you prepare for those?
I have become more comfortable with TV over the years, but initially because the camera is so close and the camera man or woman is behind the camera, I wasn't always sure where to focus. I found myself drifting at times in terms of my message, so I had to really concentrate on message on the camera. With radio, and it's probably personal preference, I have not felt any distraction, and so I prepare most for TV, and then the print. Hi, Sam. The print will be next. So that's personal preference. I tend to lose focus with the TV camera, and just find a real comfort level with radio. Also, radio is so interactive that it's, I always find with radio that there's recovery time. If you get a little bit off message, you can come back. And with TV, you'll sometimes have a 5 or 10 minute interview, and your sound bite maybe 10 seconds. And so I just don't feel it's as comprehensive or as fair. So, not that I'm anti-TV.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You had mentioned during your presentation that when you give eulogies, which can be very difficult because of the emotional value that's being transferred, you said you have to slow down your heart rate.
Right.
How do you do that?
Excellent question. One of the finest pieces of advice I ever received was when the University of Wisconsin drama coach spoke to education administration course I was in at UW-Madison. And the drama coach talked to us for a good hour. And he indicated that the most critical time in a speech is the first 2 minutes. And he stated that it's important to control your breathing at the start, that you should get an extra amount of air in your lungs for when you start and you quickly run out of gas and you've said everything, and you're about a minute into it and you're going down, down, down like that, that if you've built up enough air and maybe if you speak a little more slowly at the start, it would help your rate of speech and it would give you the command to go on and the presence to go on. So that was his theory, and I've attempted to follow that in situations where I think the start of the speech can be rocky, such as an emotional time like a eulogy. Wasn't my idea, I stole it.
I'm Tom Carlson, member of Toastmasters. Dr. Evert, in Toastmasters we do a lot of evaluating, and I would like to just pass on a little evaluation with you tonight. Your pauses are very effective. It gives us time to reflect on what you have just said, and also time to anticipate, so your pausing holds people's attention very well.
Thank you.
Have you ever had any bad habits in public speaking that you have overcome and accomplished, and how did you do that?
I probably have hundreds of bad habits. One is saying ah. And Tom, over the years, I've become less and less concerned with the bad habits. And I have attempted to focus more and more on the message. And the more I focus on the message, I believe the habits take care of themselves. I believe most audiences are very understanding. Most audiences are very empathetic. And they will work with you if you work with them. And they're not expecting perfection. So I would say I have the typical bad habits that speakers get into, and I just try to move beyond that. And the biggest bad habit I have is initially I wasn't into forgiveness of myself in terms of making errors, and I just give myself permission to make errors. No, it won't be and perfect, it never can be, and move on from there. So I hope I've answered it. One of my bad habits that I have not corrected is digression. And this is where the print media people will just shake their head and say, you gave me 4 paragraphs of whatever. What is it you're trying to tell me? So I digress. That's a bad habit.
You prepare for the speeches that you give, I presume.
Yes.
Would you prepare any differently for a speech before 500 people than you would for 5 people?
Excellent question. I would make the speech with 5 people highly interactive. I prefer interactive. If I had to follow the model of Obama, Clinton, or McCain, I'm far and away McCain. I prefer question and answer and interactive. So with 500 people, I would do a lot more memory and a lot more highlights. I don't memorize speeches, but I have the outline in mind. And the reason I go to PowerPoint is it keeps me on focus. If I don't have that, I tend to digress and get off topic.
I'll close with one more observation and maybe ask a comment from you. In Toastmasters, we have the tendency to evaluate, and one of my pet peeves, and it was beautifully demonstrated on the way down here tonight, where I figured that about 20% of the content of the speaker on the radio was, you know. Have you noticed how many people use the word you know, which to me says that the other guy isn't smart enough, I got to say it again. You didn't use it once tonight.
That habit was broken for me. My mother, second grade teacher, I'm from Onalaska, Wisconsin, took me aside 2 years before I graduated from high school, and she indicated to me that every other sentence or word was you know, you know, you know. And so that broke that habit very quickly. And I'm with you. I notice this all the time, and it's especially prevalent among our athletes.
Yes.
And I'm very, very much aware of that. So thank you for noticing.
And thank you for sharing your evening with us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tom. There's kind of a guideline in education, or a term. Carol will know this. It's called wait time. When you ask a question, educators are encouraged to wait so long. And the appropriate wait time for Toastmasters in between questions is 38 seconds. I was reading a study about that. Just kidding. Just kidding. I don't know what the wait time is at Toastmasters.
Well, we've officially condensed the wait time between questions.
All right.
And I'll do one more call. Anybody else have another question for Dr. Evert? Seeing nobody approaching, what I will do is personally thank you for sharing your evening with us. I would like to thank everyone for attending tonight. I will remind you that we will have our 3rd installment on our speaker series in 12 days. That will be on the 25th, where you will have to put up with the likes of me. What I'll be covering during that presentation is the mechanics of speaking. Some things you always want to do, some things you never want to do, and how to do them. I'll also share with you how Toastmasters works to develop specific skills in people so that they can improve their communications capabilities. Whether you want to learn how to speak better to a family member, whether you want to learn to speak better professionally. That's what we'll be going over on the 25th. I again thank the Hedberg Library and the Nancy Parker Endowment. I also would like to thank the Janesville Toastmasters for sponsoring this, and especially our featured speaker tonight, Dr. Thomas Evert.
Thank you so much.